how to use Blender, and it's hard, and I'm okay with that because sometimes things are hard in life. I need to go and put the pizza in the oven. No, I don't. But I'm going to. I technically was just about to take a break, and then I went to check, and I wasn't streaming, so that's fun. But yeah, feel free to chill out to some lo-fi hip-hop while I am doing this. I will be right back, and then I will continue to learn how to use this wonderful software.
these 3 verts on each side need to be perfectly sharp. But I've built this things 10 plus times now, so I'm going to be making it look easy. For you, you might get halfway through and want to start this thing completely over, and that's totally fine. And a reminder here, if you ever need to get your backups, go to the File, Open menu, go to your filters, select backup.blend, and then you can get your backup there. And then you can just sort by date, go back a few minutes ago, and then try again, no big deal. And that's that, and then we'll continue in the next chapter. Our goal for this chapter is to taper the side of the guard. Right now you can see it feels very blocky and square, and we're going to taper it in and make it a bit sharper. And we're going to do so with the help of proportional editing. A normal edit looks like this. We only move what we currently have selected. But with proportional editing, it acts as if the mesh is rubber and sticky, and it'll move everything around your currently selected vertices. For step number 1, we want to get out of quad view. We will not be using this for quite some time, and we want our edit mode tools, as we use them, to have as much screen space as possible. And then we're done with wireframe mode as well, so I'll switch back to my solid view, and we're ready to get working. Then for step number 2, we're going to apply a proportional editing. I'll navigate around to find the tip of the mesh. Then I'm going to hit 3 on my keyboard to jump into face selection mode, and then I'll select the very tip of the guard. Once we have that selected, we can then activate proportional editing, which is the circular shaped icon at the top of the center of our viewport. Once we have that activated, you'll notice nothing really changes at first, but from here what we're going to do is hit S on the keyboard to jump into the scale tool, and then scale down on the blue axis. And now you will see that a lot more of the guard is now going to start to be affected by this. The closer it is, the more it's getting affected, and the further away the vertices are, the less it gets affected. And that's it. We just bring it down just a little bit, and then we're the circular shaped icon at the top of the center of our viewport. Once we have that activated, you'll notice nothing really changes at first, but from here what we're going to do is hit S on the keyboard to jump into the scale tool, and then scale down on the blue axis. And now you will see that a lot more of the guard is now going to start to be affected by this. The closer it is, the more it's getting affected, and the further away the vertices are, the less it gets affected. And that's it. We just bring it down just a little bit, and then we're good to go. And that's it for this chapter. And as a bonus, if we want to go into our last operator panel, we can adjust how much is being affected. If we click and drag on the proportional size, we are now affecting more or less mesh based on the distance that we set. So the higher the value, the more it's going to affect further away vertices. The default value is a value of 1, which is perfectly fine for this example. And there we go, and we'll continue in the next chapter. The goal for this chapter is to mirror the left side of the guard over to the right side, and we're going to do this with the help of the mirror modifier. For step number 1, we're going to make sure to turn off proportional editing. Accidentally forgetting to turn this off is a very, very common mistake that we all do, and I saw this a lot in the original release. So be sure to keep an eye on that. We'll turn that off for now. Step number 2 is to delete the second half of the guard. I'll get into position so that we can work a little easier. I hit 3 on the keyboard to jump into face selection mode, and then I'm going to box drag select all 5 of the polygons on the right side of the guard. So we should only have 5 selected total. Then I'll orbit around to make sure that we have them selected. I'll hit X, and then we're going to select delete faces. Once you do that, we should then have only half the guard, and we're ready for the mirror modifier. For step number 3, we'll add the mirror modifier. First, I'll go down to my blue wrench icon, and then we'll go to add modifier. And then in the second column, towards the middle, we'll find our mirror modifier. And then once you see that, we should now see that we have the second half of the guard done automatically. And the great thing about this is the modifier system is first I'll go down to my blue wrench icon, and then we'll go to add modifier. And then in the second column, towards the middle, we'll find our mirror modifier. And then once you see that, we should now see that we have the second half of the guard done automatically. And the great thing about this is the modifier system is non-destructive, right? So any edits that we do to the left side from here on out will automatically be applied to the right side. Pretty awesome. A few bonus tips. Generally speaking, the mirror modifier is fairly straightforward. A few tips, it'll mirror based off wherever the origin is, which is this orange dot in the center of our object. And then the only attributes in this that I usually tweak are going to be the axis attributes. By default, this value should work for us, but sometimes I find myself changing from X to Y to Z, depending on the original layout of my model. We'll leave everything the default values, and we have 2 chapters left with the guard. The problem we're trying to solve in this chapter is we're this big empty space in the middle of our guard, and we're going to solve it with the help of our bridge edge loop tool. For step number 1, we're going to jump into local view by going up to the view menu and then down to local view, and then we're going to do toggle local view. And what this is going to do is allow us to isolate one object at a time, and that's basically just going to give us a little bit more space for us to work. And then we can always get out of local view by going back up to that same button. And then step number 2, we need to fill in the center of the guard, and we're going to do that with the help of the bridge edge loops tool. I'll jump into edge selection mode by hitting 2, and then I'm going to shift select the bottom 2 edges. Then in that same order, I'll select the top 2 edges. Note that we need to select these in order, so whatever edge you selected first on the bottom, we also need to select that edge first at the top, giving us a total of 4 selected edges. Then I'll go up to the edge menu, and then I'll select bridge edge loops. That's going to be the third button from the top. And what this is going to do is connect the 2 rows, filling in the polygon faces needed for our holding edges, which is coming up in the next chapter. Great, and then step number 3, we simply just repeat this process for the other side. I'm going to orbit around and get into position, and then we'll deselect by clicking anywhere off of the object. I'll shift select the top 2 edges, then in the same order, I'll shift select the bottom 2 edges. Then I'll go up to our edge menu again, then bridge edge loops, and then that's going to be the third button from the top. Great, edge loops tool. I'll jump into edge selection mode by hitting 2, and then I'm going to shift select the bottom 2 edges. Downloads folder as well, and throw all the downloadable content from this course inside of that directory. This will help you stay a bit more organized. Blender often works with relative paths, meaning later on when we make connection to textures, this becomes much more forgiving, and then we can move our holding edges, which is coming up in the next chapter. Great, and then step number 3, we simply just repeat this process for the other side. I'm going to orbit around and get into position, and then we'll deselect by clicking anywhere off of the object. I'll shift select the top 2 edges, then in the same order, I'll shift select the bottom 2 edges. Then I'll go up to our edge menu again, then bridge edge loops, and then that's going to be the third button from the top. Great, and then once we have that, we're all ready to go. I'll do a quick orbit around to make sure that's all looking good, and we'll go ahead and finish the guard in the next chapter. The goal now is to take our base guard mesh and smooth it using our subdivision modifier, and we're going to do so with the help of our edge creases tool. And what edge creases do is allow us to control the smoothing operation that happens within our subdivision modifier. For step number 1, we'll add our subdivision modifier. I'll make sure that I'm in object mode by hitting tab. I'll make sure my guard is selected, and then in the modifiers panel, I'll add modifier. Then the second column, 5th one to the bottom, we'll select subdivision surface, and we'll set the similar default values that we've been working with. We're going to disable visibility. The problem we're trying to solve in this chapter is we're this big empty space in the middle of our guard, and we're going to solve it with the help of our bridge edge loop tool. For step number 1, we're going to jump into local view by going up to the view menu and then down to local view, and then we're going to do toggle local view. And what this is going to do is allow us to isolate one object at a time, and that's basically just going to give us a little bit more space for us to work. And then we can always get out of local view by going back up to that same button. And then step number 2, we need to fill in the center of the guard, and we're going to do that with the help of the bridge edge loops tool. I'll jump into edge selection mode by hitting 2, and then I'm going to shift select the bottom 2 edges. Then in that same order, I'll select the top 2 edges. Note that we need to select these in order, so whatever edges you selected first on the bottom, we also need to select that edge first at the top, giving us a total of 4 selected edges. Then I'll go up to the edge menu, and then I'll select bridge edge loops. That's going to be the third button from the top. And what this is going to do is connect the 2 rows, filling in the polygon faces needed for our holding edges, which is coming up in the next chapter. Great, and then step number 3, we simply just repeat this process for the other side. I'm going to orbit around and get into position, and then we'll deselect by clicking anywhere off of the object. I'll shift select the top 2 edges, then in the same order, I'll shift select the bottom 2 edges. Then I'll go up to our edge menu again, then bridge edge loops, and then that's going to be the third button from the top. Great, and then once we have that, we're all ready to go. I'll do a quick orbit around to make sure that's all looking good, and we'll go ahead and finish the guard in the next chapter. The goal now is to take our base guard mesh and smooth it using our subdivision modifier, and we're
Why not? I'm gonna take a quick break from frustration. I'll be right back. crack in the sword was never supposed to be there in the hilts. I don't know why it's there. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a pause on this project right now. I'm halfway through it. I'll come back to it. I'm a little frustrated with it right now, that's all. And
do so with the help of our
frustration's okay. But I think I want to find something that is a little more beginner friendly for myself. Something that's a little shorter too, because the first tutorial, I mean, I did something that looked like file, open. I did this. Oh no, it wasn't that. Open. Oh, I guess I didn't even save it. Oh, maybe is this in sort? Oh, that's why. This is what I did. There's some blocks falling. Got some nice light on it. You know? Oh. And all of that was from CG Fast Track. Shoutouts to them. Beginner donut tutorial.
If you've just opened Blender for the first time and then you've tried
And
to
it's
do things,
1642
maybe try to see how far you can.
minutes. Okay, let's try this one out. File, new, general.
Can go without getting help, you might have discovered you need help immediately. You can't even move things
This is factual.
without a tutorial. But the good news
I
is
can move things
you don't
now.
need to learn
I
everything that
know
you can see.
how I
right?
can move it in this.
I, for example, have been using
vertice, I can
Blender for
move it
18
in this
years,
vertice or
and
this one.
I still have not
vector, whatever you call
touched some parts of Blender, like scripting. Never touched it because I don't need to. For
I
what
even
it is
know
that
how to
I'm
do
trying
this.
This
Wait,
flight's
no,
gonna kill me.
this. I can
It's
copy
if you're
it
familiar
now,
with the 80-20 rule, I think there's really about
but
20%
I'm gonna do that
of
and then hit Z.
Blender's
and then I'm gonna
features that
hit
you'll use in 80
do,
or
and then
90%
exit,
of
and then
projects.
I'm gonna go,
And that's what I want to teach you in this tutorial series. And then since I think doing is the best way to learn,
Nothing's
along the
happening
way we'll
because it
also be
doesn't
building our
have.
very own donut, of course. The donut, what I'm known for. This is the third time I'm making a donut tutorial series. Every time Blender releases a new version, I
Didn't do anything.
make this series. So if
The
you finish
mesh.
this full series, you will end up with a donut
Yeah, I
that looks
forgot
very similar
most
to
of what I
this.
learned in the first
So
tutorial.
let's get started.
I want to make a
This
donut
big
though.
window that you can see right here opened up, this is called the 3D viewport, and it's where you'll spend probably 90% of your time, because everything you need to visualize, whether it's an animation or an archviz or anything like that, it all happens right here. So by default, you can see you get 3 objects. You've got a cube, you've got what looks like a ball on a piece of string, that's a lamp, and then you've got a camera, this little, what do you call that, like a triangle arrow looking thing. That's a camera, okay? And then if you were to render this by going to render image, or hitting the hotkey F12, it would take a snapshot from that camera view, okay? And although this looks very similar to what you were just looking at, this one actually has lighting information, okay? You got shadow, you got some light coming off the top here, and if you had textures or materials and everything else, it would all be calculated, okay? So if you've already
This will
used
be my
other 3D
project
software, you're
for
already
the stream
familiar with the
today.
concept, but this is one of the basic principles of 3D rendering. What you build in the 3D viewport is sort of like a simplified version of what it is you're trying to create. And then when you're ready for that final image, you hit render, and then it uses your CPU or your GPU to crunch all the numbers and calculate the light and the bounces and everything like that to create that final beautiful image. So that's the basics. All right, but you might notice, like, okay, well, all right, can we move this thing? How do we even do something basic like move it? There's 2 ways you could do it. One would be to use the move tool in your toolbar. If you activate that, you can see that over the cube now you get these arrows.
That's the move tool right here.
If you were to
Woo!
click and drag on any of those arrows, you would move it along that
Oh, yeah.
axis.
If you do
clicked on
this,
the white circle in the middle, then that would just be sort of like
super
free
far
drawing.
because you can just
Okay.
scroll infinitely.
Now, you could do it that way, but actually, I never do
And
it
hello,
that way,
cube.
because it is far easier to just learn the hotkey, which in this case is G. G for grab. Okay, so if you just hit G, your cursor doesn't have to be anywhere near it, and I'm not clicking. My hands are off the clicker. It's just attached to your cursor basically the moment you hit G. And then
Now
if you
we're
just do a single left click, it will confirm its movement. So G, click. And my cursor could be anywhere, right? And I can do it, which is actually good because you don't have to like think about where is my cursor. Do I have to like get it on here and then hit it? No, it's really, it just allows you to work really fast. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. I know I'm only 2 minutes into the video. 4 minutes. All right, anyways. Now, one thing you're missing with this is those axes lines, like being able to move it along a specific axis is actually a really common action. You want to use it all the time. And you can do that after you have hit G by typing the letter of the axes. So there are 3 axes, and the axes letters are X, okay, which is the left and right, Y, which is back and forwards, and then Z, which is up and down. Some 3D softwares call the Y-axis the up and down.
the light.
Blenders,
That's
it's
what I'm
the
hitting right
Z,
now.
the blue one. Alternatively, you can also, as you're moving it, if you hold down on your mouse, on your scroll wheel, if you push in, that's called the middle mouse button, push in until it clicks, and just hold that, and you can see you get this little line that draws out, and then you can just drag it to the nearest line, nearest axis, and it will automatically snap to that, which is really handy. Pretty cool. Not too bad. Okay, so that's moving things. Now, the other 2 actions that are really common is rotate and scale. And you can, again, you could use the tool just by clicking here, and then you can, you know, rotate it on a specific axis. You could click in the middle and like do a trackball thing. Scale, exact same thing. Scale it like that. But again, I recommend learning the hotkeys, which you can learn just by hovering over it. Yeah, the hotkey for this one. So where it says shortcut, shift, spacebar, it's technically true. You could activate it from this little menu here if you hit shift.
Oh, is it just like a?
But it's the one after that. R. Really easy to remember. R for rotate. Okay, so rotate.
Part 1.
And then you can hit the letter of the axes as well, or do that same holding the middle mouse button. Oh, that's weird. Maybe because I did it after tapping it. Anyways, and then you've got scale, which is hovering over it. S for scale. Okay, S, X, Y, and Z.
Okay, so
like that. And if you wanna
Blender
cancel movement,
Guru.
you can hit escape, or you can just
I thought it
right
was a
click as well, and
16-minute
it'll also
video
cancel the movement.
on how to make a donut. Which
But yeah, so
I mean,
you can see you
I'm
can do
learning what
a lot
is
just with
realistic
those
and not realistic
few
still with
little,
Blender. So
movements
it's not
there. Okay,
realistic
so
to have a
that's how you
16-minute
move stuff
full
about.
Blender tutorial
Now,
video.
let's talk about the next
He's
thing
got
we wanna
about,
learn is like how do
let's
I
see
actually
here,
move my view? Like how could I look and explore the rest of
16
this?
videos on this.
And that is also
I
done
think
with your middle mouse button. Okay, so if you click in on your scroll wheel until it clicks, you are orbiting. That is how you orbit. And
I
my
think I could
laptop
knock out,
people
like-
with track pads, you are panicking right now because you just realized you don't have a middle mouse button. You can do it in a pinch by going to the top right-hand corner. There's a little gizmo.
let's
If you
teach
just click
myself
and
some,
drag
like
on
all the way
that,
to the modifiers.
You can see.
And
that
then
you are able
we can
to,
get into
free rotate around.
we can get into the modeling tomorrow.
Alternatively,
I
you
think.
can also
That's-
go edit preferences, and then underneath input, if you click emulate.
That's
3D
another
button
hour
mouse,
almost.
this will enable you to holding down Alt. If you then hold
Okay,
down
we'll
left
model.
click,
We'll go to the modeling.
It just does the same thing.
I
as-
think,
as the
because
mouse button,
It'll give me
which
the
is pretty
donut
cool.
shape,
It's not bad.
and then that will be
Whilst
a
you're
good
here, by
end
the way,
for me
you
learning.
might also,
for today.
depending
I'm
on
not
the size
gonna
of your screen,
force
you might
myself
wanna
to
change
do
the
stuff
resolution, because by default it's
because
1,
that's not
which
going to
on
be
my
good.
4K monitor you can see that my buttons and the text
But
are
I
really
do
small.
need to challenge
Um,
myself.
And if you crank it all the way up, you can get to something comfortable. Point 4 or 5 is what I would normally go for. And by the way, I'm snapping it like as you're dragging something. If you
I
hold
had
down
a lot of
Control
that sword
using
done actually,
incremental,
but I
numbers
think it was just me
to, like,
copying
hold
what
them.
the dude was
I
doing
normally go like 1.4 if
rather
I
than
was
me
using,
learning
using
step by
myself,
step
but it's a
what
tutorial,
everything
so
kind of
keep it big
does.
so you
But
guys
yeah,
can
I
see
know about the render
what I'm getting at.
size and everything for the
Cool.
screen
And,
already.
oh, another thing, just while I'm here, just mentioning, some of you are from other 3D software, 3ds Max, Maya, that kind of thing. You might find it helpful to know there's an industry-compatible key map that you could enable, which will, I'll put them up on the screen here, but it's basically, it's more common keyboard shortcuts if you're used to other software. But for this tutorial series and everyone else, I recommend sticking to the Blender one because, of course, all the hotkeys and everything you'll learn whilst learning Blender will be for this hotkey thing. Anyways, all right, okay, so that is that's orbiting. Okay, now you can see as I orbit around, it's like locked on to my middle of my screen here. Okay, if I want to move somewhere else, that is pan, which is shift middle mouse button. Okay, now I'm shifting my view to somewhere else where I could play around, place and shift again. And
Myself.
Here on a trackpad, you could also use this.
Oh, I was talking to Wayne.
This little hand icon thing.
No.
At the top there. Do invest in a mouse, please. You will.
He's doing good.
3D. You really should get a mouse. It's going to be tough. Oh, the other thing that I'm doing right now is I'm using the scroller to zoom in and out. You can also use this little magnifying glass up there, or hold down control, and then again click in on the middle mouse, and that will use a smooth movement rather than the scroll wheel, which is quite jaggedy. Okay, cool. So let's say you've moved the cube all the way over there. Like, okay, so you could, if you wanted to go and inspect your cube, you could, you know, work your way over there by using shift middle mouse button to pan over there. But it is far easier to just learn the hotkey number pad period, which will focus on any selected object. So if I want to go to my camera over there, I can select my camera, and number pad period will take me over to there. Again, my laptop users are going, oh no, I don't have a number pad. All right. The alternative way to do it is hold down the tilde key, which is that weird key underneath your escape key you've probably never used before. That brings up a pie menu with a bunch of view options, and view selected is focus. View selected will take you there. Okay, cool. So we've learned orbiting with middle mouse, shift middle mouse to pan, and then control middle mouse to zoom in and out or scroll. The other one you probably want to learn is align your view to axes, because it's something that you, like, new beginners often end up like upside down, and they're like, how did this happen? So you can go to bring yourself the right way up just by clicking one of these letters on your axes up here. Okay, so if you clicked that, I'm now the right way. Well, am I the right way up? Yes, I'm the right way up. I'm just focused on a weird part of the scene. That's why it's very weird. Alternatively, instead of these, so there's the 3 axes that you could snap yourself to. You could also learn the hotkeys, which is number pad 1 for front view, 1 for front view, 3 for side view, and 7 for top view. That's only number pad. It doesn't work for your keys along the top unless you wanted to enable that over here, emulate number pad, and then it would do that. But yeah, so that's handy as well. You might also find, you'll notice, that in this view, this is orthographic mode. Okay, so we can't see the other sides of our cube right now. It's a weird looking cube, but we can't see the other sides because this is orthographic mode. It's like looking at it with like a focal length of like infinity, right? So there's no depth in our scene right now, which is actually really handy, and it defaults to it for this align to view thing immediately, because you usually want that. But the hotkey for that is number pad 5, and that will take you in and out of perspective mode. You can also do it up there like that. You can see the difference. Oh, and another way that you could see align to view, because there's a couple of ways. You could also use that tilde key. That'll take you to the top, the right, the side, etc. You could also use the viewport. You could change those. It's also got the hotkeys there if you happen to forget them. And the other way is the same as ZBrush, if you're familiar with ZBrush. Oh, I just cleared the location of that with Alt-G. You don't need to remember that one. That's a weird one. Similar to ZBrush, holding down Alt whilst middle mouse button orbiting will also snap it to the nearest axes, which is also really handy as well. So if I'm like moving around and I'm like, I want to look up, just hold down Alt and it'll just snap it there, which is really handy. So that's kind of the 3D viewport. We'll obviously get way more into this as we delve into the other lessons. But whilst we're here, these other sections over here. So on the right-hand side, this is your properties. And as you can imagine, it's the properties of things in the 3D viewport, or the scene. You can change render settings or things here. And look, there's a lot here. Like, I would strongly recommend not trying to learn all the values because you're not going to remember them anyway. We'll go through them as they're needed in this tutorial series. I think the best way to learn is to just do for something that you need to do. So that's what I try to teach. These options, some of these options will change depending on what is selected. So like if my camera is selected, you can see I get a camera icon, and then I can change some camera settings. If my cube is selected, I get some material settings, right? I could click material, and I could change the color to red, and I could see a beautiful gray red color. It's a weird looking red. The reason it's not changing over here in the 3D viewport is because, again, this is a simplified view of the final render. So there's no material properties in this view. We'll get to viewport rendering later on, but for now, you would see it though if you were in rendered, again, F12 to do an actual render. Now, at the top here, we have got a outliner. So this is keeping a running inventory of everything that you've got in your 3D viewport at the moment. So we've got 3 objects and we've got 1 collection. So a collection is just, it's like a folder, basically. Simple way to think of it. So you can like organize things. You can rename things just by double clicking on it. Yeah, whatever, right? And so that'll automatically update as you add things to the scene. Like if I was to duplicate my object, which I could do by hitting Shift D to duplicate, you can see there's created another object right up there in the outliner. So if I ever like lose something and I'm like, oh, where's that thing? I can just find it on here and then just, bam, whoops, bam. Oh, by the way, I just accidentally tapped number pad 0, which is how you can look through the camera view. You could also do it by hitting the little camera icon on the right there, or by going viewport, camera, or by hitting the tilde key. So there are 4 places to get viewport options depending on what device or whatever it is that you're looking at. I deleted something by hitting X. You could also do it by hitting delete. By the way, I'm throwing a lot of keys at you, keyboard shortcuts. It's a lot to take in, especially when you're starting. So I created a keyboard shortcut PDF, and the link for that is in the description. It's just a list. It's like 3 or 4 pages of the most common hotkeys that you'll need to learn, or you might need to reference as you're using Blender. So you can basically load it up on another monitor whilst you're working, and you've got it there as reference if you need it. I used to make it like a bonus for signing up for my newsletter, but now I'll just make it free. So you don't have to subscribe. You can just click that link, view it, and hopefully that'll make it easier to use Blender. You can still subscribe to my newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter on tutorials, artworks, and things that I find in the 3D industry. So if you want to keep up to date and learn new things, you can subscribe to that in the description as well. But that's it for this one because we have covered quite a lot of ground. So we'll keep it simple. And open up a brand new scene in Blender. And then join me in part 2, which is where we'll actually start. This tutorial series was brought to you by my company, Polygon. High quality models and textures for better renders. All right, enough faffing around, as my late grandfather would say. We have learned the basics of the interface, all the hotkeys. We fooled around. Now we're going to start building that donut. Okay, so we are going to delete our default cube, which is just the delete key, or X, which is the older shortcut, and we're going to replace it with something new. So to add a new object in Blender, you need to go up to Add, up here, and you get this long list, or you can hit the hotkey, which is what I'm going to be using for the tutorial, Shift A. And truthfully, most of these options, a lot of the options you rarely use. Like speaker, I don't think I've ever used. Most of the time what you're looking for is mesh, because to render anything, you really need to start with a mesh. Like if you followed like a character tutorial, you might be surprised when they're like, all right, start with a cube, and then, we'll bip-bidi-boo, and we'll form the character eventually from that, right? But you have to start with something. So usually you pick the object which most resembles what it is you're trying to create. And in this case, there's a really easy one. It's the donut-shaped one, the torus. Torus. That is a word I never would have learned, except for Blender. I would have called that a donut, but evidently the mathematicians decided they need a special word for it. Okay, when you add an object and do certain actions actually in Blender, you get options straight after adding it, okay? But they're kind of hidden because they're trying to stay out of the way unless you need them. And it's down there in the bottom left-hand corner. There's a little box, which if you click it, it expands. And then you get options like the resolution,
trying to learn how to use
the size of it and everything. Now, if you don't see that box, it's probably because you accidentally clicked off it, okay?
How are you doing today?
It'll only show it after you've just added it. If you click off it, it assumes you're fine with it. You're good, okay? Now, if you haven't done another action since then, if you haven't edited and clicked on something else or whatever, you can temporarily bring it back for one last time, really, until you do something else with F9. Okay, so F9 will bring those same options back just at your cursor, basically. But if you don't see it, then, just re-add it, delete it, and re-add it, and you'll get those options back again. Okay, so with this, let's make some changes to it. Okay, so for starters, this is a very thin donut. And you want to know this maybe, but this is the third time I've made this donut beginner series. Every time there's a new version of Blender, I make this series again. This is number 3. And basically, for the last 5 years of my life, I have been seeing every day on Twitter when somebody tags me in their donut render. And I've become very good at realizing the attributes that make donuts look good. And I think the best donuts are the ones that look thick. The ones that look like, oh yeah, I want to sink my teeth into that because it's got a lot of icing, it's got a lot of dough. I don't know, just something about a fat donut, just like, yeah, that looks delicious. So I'm going thick this time, okay? And then the major segments and the minor segments, these are, as you can probably see, we'll call it the resolution of our donut, but it is it's the amount of geometry. Okay, so this, you are probably tempted to go like really high, because this is what I did when I first started using Blender in 3D. I'm like, I'm trying to make something high quality and realistic, so it's got to be smooth. Okay, so I'm going to go really high res. It's actually the opposite. You do not want that. I immediately realized when I started using this is a terrible idea. For one, you can't go back, okay? When you go high. You can, if you go low, you can add other things, which is what we're going to do, to make it smoother, but it's harder to go back. And also with this, it takes longer to render, it's harder to work with because it's a bigger file, your viewport slows down, your computer's whirring away harder. And also it is harder to work with, okay? When we get into edit mode, and we're going to do this later, and like do some edits and stuff here, I have to work with this many vertices, these little points, and that is just too much. So you actually want the exact opposite. So we want to keep it as
I'll
minimum.
make a PP after I'm done making my
donut. The minimum amount of detail depends on what it is you're trying to create.
That'll be the next
one.
one.
Could go like really low, but we're actually going to use part of this donut for the icing. So I'm trying to think, okay, what am I going to do with the icing? Am I going to make some like dribbly bits going down it? I don't know. Having done this a few times, I think I'm going to go with around like somewhere around 40 to 20. Something like that. Let's go 16. 16 looks good. Okay. By the way, and you would never know this because how could you if you're a beginner? But like it's also a good idea to try to keep square faces, because as a general, if you're making something organic and it's going to be smooth, if it's got rectangular faces, it can like stretch the shading and things just start to look weird. So I'm trying to keep it generally to a square face. Doesn't have to be a hard rule, but something like that. All right, then I'm going to click off it and I'm done. And I can't get those options back temporarily with F9, but you get the idea. Okay, cool. So, great. Let's talk about, first of all, the size of this donut, okay? Because although it looks like, what is the scale of our scene here, right? We're like looking
I feel like
there, like
I
how
have
big
my
is this
donut
grid
now.
floor? We don't know. It could be microscopic. It could be 500 meters. It could be landscape size. We don't know.
There's not a lot of stuff he's doing with this here donut.
Each one of these grid squares here, is it 1 meter or 2? I think it's 1 meter. Hang on. Yes, it is 1 meter. Okay, so this, actually, the size of our donut is humongous. It is 3 meters by 3 meters, okay? So if you, sorry, I didn't tell you the hotkey. N Very handy, convenient shortcut. You just bring it up when you want to learn, click on your object, and then go to item, and then you can see details around your object. Okay, so it's 3 meters by 3 meters, which is like roughly like 2 people laying down lengthways. By the way, speaking of that, if you are American, for my American audience, you can change your units
Don't
to
do
be
that.
Wacky Imperial, and you can get 9.9 periwinkles or whatever it is. I don't know. You can do that.
Sure,
I'm going to
that's
use
exact.
3 meters because the rest of the world is also watching. All right. So this obviously needs to be much smaller. So we're going to scale it. Scaling the hotkey S. Scale it right down to the size of a donut, which I've learned is around about like the biggest size would be around about like 10 centimeters, right? Yeah, roughly. So yeah, 10 centimeters is what we're looking for. Something like that. We could have done it when we added the torus, but that was radius.
I'm gonna make a
Radius is
big
you gotta
old
double it to
donut.
make it. I'm like, just scale it down after.
32
you make it
centimeters.
much easier.
Yeah.
Now,
It's a cake.
The other thing I want to do is apply the scale because, and this is another thing you would never know if you're a beginner, but it's sort of a running joke in the 3D world. But like, anytime you run into a problem with your mesh, something's not working, apply the scale. Because if your scale is wrong, other things tend to perform wrong, like modifiers and other things like that. So this scale here should pretty much always be 1 if you can, yeah, try and make it always 1, roughly speaking. So to apply your scale, you go Control A and then hit scale. Okay, so Control A for apply and then scale. And now it is 1. Nothing has changed, but it just means things will work better in the future. And I'm just doing it because I know I'll forget it, and then they'll be like in the comments, and people go, "Why is mine messed up?" And it was because of this part I didn't say. Anyway, all right. Okay, so how do we get rid of these jagged lines? Because that's probably your next question. How do we get rid of those jagged lines? There are two types of shading in Blender or in 3D: flat and smooth. So by default, it is flat. To change it to smooth, we just right-click and then hit Shade Smooth. Okay. And when we do that, it is basically like for these faces here. It has taken, instead of treating each face separately, if they're an adjacent face, it's going to like stretch the light across. It's going to treat it as if it is one continuous face rather than 2 faces. So for organic objects, which means like things that are flowing essentially, or rounded things maybe, you generally
Yeah, I
want
can
smooth
take this
things,
to a
and then for
fourth
like
video, I think.
architecture or hard surface things, you want flat things. Shade smooth. So we've got rid of that. That's good. Now you'll notice that it has not fixed the silhouette of our object. Okay, so shade smooth is a illusion. Okay, it's not actually adding any geometry, which is great because it's lightweight, it's easy to work with. It's not adding geometry, but your silhouette will still be broken, or it will still look jagged. The only way to fix that is to add more detail. It's something that games, that's kind of the thing. If you want to look at a game and go like, I wonder how how poly this thing is. Like, look at the silhouette of a character or the shape of a building or something like that. And if you see jagged lines, you can basically see the mesh, like how high poly something is by the silhouette. So we can fix that with something called a subsurf operation, okay, or subdivision. And there are a few ways to do it, but the way we do it in Blender is with adding a modifier. Okay, so we click this little wrench. Or is it a spanner? Is that a spanner? It's been a while since I got my hands dirty. Anyways, it's the modifier panel over here. And then go up and underneath add modifier. If you click it, you get a whole bunch of different options here. And the one that we're looking for is, I mean, you use it so often. I wish it was at the top, but it's not. It's down here, subdivision surface. So you click that, and you might see that it has now smoothed out ever so slightly. You can see that edge there, the jagged edge is no longer there. Or it is there, but it is less. So what is subsurf? Yeah, it's called a subsurf, even though it's called subdivision. Subsurf modifier, what it is doing is and I'm going to temporarily turn this off by that little icon there.
Okay.
That's viewport. So if you uncheck that, it's disabling it for your viewport. And that one is for render, if you want to disable it for your render. Okay, so what it is doing is, you can see the edge there, right? If there are 3 points that make up that edge there, subsurf is now adding in, it's doubling the amount of detail across the entire mesh, not just the silhouette, the entire mesh. Every single point, it is now adding another one. Now, if you do 2 levels, so levels viewport and render, you can probably guess, that's just one operation. Okay, if I set this to 2, which is what you would see, set it to 2, which is what you see when you would render it, it's doing it again. Okay, so it's, I guess the word's exponentially. It's exponentially adding detail every time you add this. So it's going to do it again and again and again. So obviously you don't want to go too high because otherwise your render times would be crazy. And yeah, you just want to keep it as low as possible. So often I keep it 1 or 0 whilst I'm working in the viewport, and then for the render I keep it at like 1 or 2 or something. Anyways, all right, okay, so we're spending a little long on this, but I need to just give you some background on how to make things look smooth without really going high res. Okay, so as I teased before, this mesh is made up of little points, and we can edit those points and adjust things and whatnot by going into edit mode, which you can do by hitting tab on your keyboard. Okay, another way is to go up to the top left hand corner, change from object mode to edit mode. Okay, so tab is just a fast way to switch between those two modes. Another way, third way, because why not? Control tab will bring up the pie menu, and then you can enter into, along with just object and edit mode, but like texture paint and sculptor mode, and we'll do a bunch of stuff later on, but edit mode. Okay, so in edit mode, we can see that we're now able to see the skeleton roughly that makes up our mesh. Okay, each of these little points here is what makes up our mesh. So these points are called vertices. Sorry, a single one is called a vertex. Multiples are called vertices. Always get them confused because it's got an S on it as well. It's like vertices, vertexes. It's not vertexes, it's vertices. Anyways, these little points make up our mesh, and on each of these points, if you've got 3 or more, usually 4 is the ideal one you're usually aiming for when you're making meshes, you can make a face. Okay, so if I just delete, I'll just hit X and I'll show you what it looks like without a face. Okay, so between each of these points there, I'll add another one with F, there is a face. Okay, so all the points together make up a face, and then that makes up your mesh. So what this means is that with these points, if I want to change the look of my mesh, I can take some of these points and I can move them, okay? And you use the exact same hotkeys as you did before. So to move something, it is G for grab. Okay, so if I move this up and then go back out of edit mode to object mode, you can see as I move around, it's now got a little lump on it. Okay, pretty handy. So I could do that, right? I could tweak the shape of my mesh. Okay, so let's say like I wanted to, you know, like make my donut look kind of like lopsided, or like add some detail, because this is necessary, by the way. Your brain, when it thinks about objects, because you've seen them so many times, it simplifies it in your head. You think of a donut as being round, but it's bumpy, it's lumpy, it was thrown in the fire, the guy who like made the dough, it was all lopsided, but in your head you just think of it as a round circle. The digital world will always give you the perfect thing. So you need to go in and add those imperfections. There's an old quote, don't know who said it. Imperfection is the digital perfection. Yeah, I don't know. It's very, very true. So think of that. So anyways, we need to add some lumps to it and make our donut lopsided. So if we held down shift, we could select multiple points, and then we could drag these out. I could do this. I could, slowly go through it. Now this is tedious, as I'm sure you can see. Clicking, lots and lots of clicking, little points. And that's really because that's not the way I would do this. What I would do is use a feature that you use all the time, and that is proportional editing. So if you click this little button at the top here, or the hotkey for that is O, turn that on and off. What this will do is that now when I rotate scale or hit G to grab and move it, now it's actually grabbing vertices around it and it is moving it together as a whole. Now by default, your proportional size is really high, okay? So if I scroll up, I can gradually bring the fall off down to what actually makes sense for my donut, okay? Now this was actually a point, I was reading the comments on the last video, the last version of this I made, and this was a point that a lot of people got stuck on. If you can't see this ring here, just keep scrolling up, because it is there. If you see top left-hand corner, actually, it gives you the measurement. As I scroll, you can see the measurement of my fall-off. What you're looking for is something like a 0.04. If you can't see 0.04 meters, just keep scrolling up until you see it. And if you're on trackpad, because those people also got stuck, because they're like, how do I scroll while I'm doing it? All you do is, on trackpad, you tap G, then do a single click, And then down here in the bottom left-hand corner, you've got those options again. And then you could adjust your proportional size to like a 0.04. And then if you move, you should see the correct proportional fall off. Okay. Really, guys, invest in a mouse, please. Going trackpad, look, it's fine for Facebook, but like you're doing stuff in 3D, you gotta have a mouse. Come on. All right. Okay, so now that I do this with my fall off
so
radius, and if I just
lumpy.
scroll up and down,
I'm
I can
definitely not doing
adjust
it right.
and I can make my donut look however I want much more easily. Okay, make this part go out. Maybe make this part have like a little lump that's sort of skew-if like that. Maybe this middle part sort of like
That
this.
does not look proper.
Okay, and I'll do another one here, something like that. Okay, now that's a little lopsided. It's a little bit repetitive of what's on that side. And this.
I'm going to go get myself some trail mix. And I think I'm... Is anybody watching right now? Holding me accountable? Love you, bye! I will. Got a viewer. Oh. Hi. Ugh. Why are you watching me? Ugh. I'm going to stop for today because I have been blending a lot and I think I'm mentally exhausted at this very moment. I not only did the last one with the sword, I did the whole Minecraft block render. I'm doing a donut right now. I'll work more on the donut tomorrow, but I'm missing steps. And I think I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna rewatch video 2 for Blender Guru, and I am going to broadcast that. I'm thinking, oh, look at the kitty. Okay. Anyways, adios for now, folks.
This tutorial series
is pretty dope. Where's OBS Studio? There it is. Okay. Bye for now, everyone.